The mansion had stood empty for decades, perched on a hill at the edge of town, its once grand walls now cracked and weathered. The gate, rusted and crooked, groaned in the wind, and ivy crept across every surface, wrapping the building like a green, suffocating shroud. Locals whispered that the mansion was alive, not with people, but with shadows that moved on their own, that had wills separate from their owners. Curiosity pulled me toward it, a magnetic force I couldn't resist. I pushed open the heavy front door. It creaked on its ancient hinges, a sound that seemed louder than it should be, echoing through the vast, empty hall. Dust hung in the air like a tangible fog, and the faint smell of mildew mixed with old wood filled my nose. My flashlight flickered, casting long, distorted shadows along the cracked walls. Every instinct screamed that I should leave, yet something compelled me forward. The foyer was enormous, with a grand staircase rising into darkness above. Shadows clung to the corners, flickering independently of the light. One moved, a subtle stretch along the wall, curling toward me, then froze when I turned my head. I felt their presence everywhere, pressing against me, patient, aware. A faint whisper tickled my ears, almost imperceptible. "Welcome, we've been waiting." I stepped further inside. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, echoing unnaturally through the empty mansion. Dusty furniture leaned precariously against walls, mirrors cracked and streaked with grime reflected distorted fragments of light and movement. For a fleeting moment, I saw shadows on the floor shift without any corresponding source. They wriggled, stretched, and darted across the marble and wooden surfaces, seemingly alive. I ventured into the drawing room. Tattered curtains swayed as if brushed by an unseen hand, and a chandelier above tilted ever so slightly, catching the faint moonlight in its dusty crystals. A shadow slithered across the floor, independent of any object, pausing at my feet before stretching toward the far wall. I froze, my breath catching. The mansion wasn't simply empty, it was awake, and it was watching. A sudden noise, a soft scuffing of shoes on the staircase, made me spin. No one was there. Only the shadows flickered, moving faster now, curling around corners, lingering on walls, sliding across floors. The air was thick, heavy with the sense of being observed. Every instinct told me to leave, yet a morbid curiosity drew me further in. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking ominously. Shadows clung to the walls, stretching unnaturally, flickering like living smoke. I felt their gaze on me from all sides. The upper floor was a labyrinth of narrow hallways, closed doors, and peeling wallpaper. Faint movements in the corners caught my eye, shadows that didn't belong to anything, that acted with purpose, shifting when I wasn't looking directly at them. In one hallway, I noticed a door slightly ajar. The shadow in front of it seemed to pulse, moving almost as if breathing. I hesitated, hand on the knob. The whispers grew louder, layered now, almost intelligible. "Come, stay, watch, belong." I swallowed hard and pushed the door open. The room beyond was empty, save for a single chair in the center. Shadows stretched across the walls and floor independently, curling toward the chair, as if performing some ritual I couldn't understand. I stepped in. The shadows recoiled slightly, then resumed their motion. The air felt charged, thick with awareness. One shadow, darker than the rest, flickered toward me, moving in ways that defied logic. It paused at my feet, curling around my legs before retreating back to the walls. My pulse raced. The mansion wasn't just haunted, It was sentient, aware, and playful in its attention. A soft creaking echoed from another room. I turned and saw the shadow stretch toward the hallway, following some invisible path. I could feel it observing, patient, eternal, aware. Every movement I made, every breath I drew, every glance I cast across the room fed its consciousness. The mansion was alive, but not in the way one expects, alive in the shadows, in the corners, in the space between light and dark. I walked cautiously down the hallway. Shadows shifted in response to my movements, stretching and wriggling across floors and walls. The air seemed to pulse, resonating with faint whispers layered over the soft creak of the old house. I could feel the mansion's awareness pressing against me, guiding, watching, waiting. I realized then that leaving might not be simple. The shadows were patient, eternal, and aware, each one seemingly with a purpose. A mirror at the end of the hallway caught my attention. For a brief moment, I saw not my reflection but a cluster of shadows twisting in impossible ways, moving independently of any source. They seemed to pulse in response to my heartbeat, aware of my fear, aware of my curiosity. A whisper drifted through the air, chilling me to the bone. You cannot leave, not yet. I backed away slowly, glancing at every shadow, every corner, every flicker of light. The mansion seemed to breathe around me, alive with patience and awareness. The staircase loomed in the distance, shadows stretching toward it, waiting. I felt the weight of countless unseen eyes, layered into the very walls, floors, and ceilings. The old mansion wasn't just a building, it was a living, sentient entity, and it had taken notice of me. I moved cautiously deeper into the mansion, flashlight sweeping across walls and floors. Shadows darted at the edge of my vision, curling and stretching independently of any light source. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of air through broken windows, seemed amplified, layering over the soft murmurs that filled the empty hallways. Stay, watch, belong. In the grand ballroom, the once opulent chandelier hung crooked, its crystals catching faint moonlight. Shadows slithered across the polished floor, flickering with subtle intelligence. I could feel them moving with purpose, stretching toward corners, writhing around the furniture, and curling up the walls. Some even seemed to mirror my movements, but slightly delayed, as if mocking me or testing my reactions. Books, old letters, and trinkets lay scattered on tables, untouched yet disturbed. A dusty piano in the corner let out a faint, discordant note, though no hands touched the keys. Shadows curled around it, wrapping the sound into the room, layering it with whispers that seemed almost sentient. Listen, move, belong, stay. I ascended the staircase to the second floor, each step groaning under my weight. The hallway stretched unnaturally, lined with closed doors and peeling wallpaper. Shadows pooled along the edges of the walls, flickering in response to my flashlight. Some twisted into vaguely human shapes, crouched and watching, yet vanished the moment I tried to focus on them directly. I entered one of the upstairs rooms. Dust motes swirled in the weak light, and a single chair sat in the center. Shadows moved independently, stretching toward it, curling around its legs, as if performing some ritual I couldn't comprehend. The whispers grew louder, layering together, almost intelligible. You cannot leave, stay, read, watch, belong. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the floor, pausing briefly at my feet before slinking up the walls and disappearing. My pulse quickened. Every movement I made, every glance I cast, seemed to guide the shadows. They were aware, sentient, patient, and eternal. The mansion wasn't haunted in the ordinary sense. It was alive, existing in a realm between light and darkness, feeding on awareness and fear. I moved from room to room, discovering objects subtly displaced, books stacked differently, picture frames tilted, mirrors reflecting shadows that didn't belong to me. Whispers followed, layered, weaving in and out of my thoughts. Read, watch, stay, forever. The mansion's presence pressed against me, heavy and persistent, aware of my curiosity, aware of my fear. In the library upstairs, I paused. Dusty shelves lined with forgotten volumes stretched endlessly. Shadows flitted among the aisles, moving independently, sometimes flickering across the ceiling, sometimes slinking along the floor. A book slid slightly forward, opening on its own. Pages flipped rapidly, stopping abruptly on symbols that seemed alive, shifting beneath my gaze. The whispers intensified, threading into my mind. You cannot leave. Stay, watch, belong. A figure formed among the shadows, a tall, humanoid shape with no face, moving deliberately across the room. It paused, then mirrored my movements with slight delay. I could feel its awareness pressing against mine, testing me, observing, patient and eternal. Every instinct screamed to leave, but I was rooted, drawn in by fascination and fear alike. As I backed away from the library shelves, shadows stretched from the walls, pooling along the floor, reaching toward me. A faint, cold draft made the candlelight flicker in the room, and the whispers swirled, overlapping with the faint creak of floorboards and rustling of fabric. Stay, read, belong, forever. I moved into the master bedroom, where a massive bed sat under a broken canopy. Shadows pooled beneath it, curling and twisting like living smoke. Mirrors reflected figures that weren't there, walls shifted subtly, stretching the space unnaturally. I realized then that the mansion itself was alive, its consciousness extending through shadows, objects, and even a faint echo of sounds, patient and eternal. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the hallway. I spun. A shadow stretched from the doorway, flitting along the walls, twisting and curling as if testing my resolve. The whispers rose, urgent and layered. You cannot leave. Stay, belong, watch. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging as I understood the depth of the mansion's awareness. It was not just observing, it was interacting, aware of every thought, every breath, every movement. I stumbled into a smaller room, bookshelves lining the walls, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. Shadows flickered across the floor, climbing the shelves, forming vague human shapes. A book tumbled to the floor, opening on a page with dozens of eyes drawn in ink. The whispers pressed against my mind, insistent, layered. Read, watch, stay, belong, forever. I felt the mansion pulse around me, alive with patience and intent. Shadows shifted independently, curling along walls and floors, pooling in corners, and wrapping around objects. I could sense a rhythm to the mansion, a subtle awareness that fed on attention, fear, and curiosity. The building was sentient, eternal, and aware, and I was now a part of its observation. I realized with a chill that leaving would not be easy. Every shadow, every shifting object, every whisper contributed to the mansion's consciousness. The air felt thick, almost tangible, pressing against me, alive with patience and awareness. I had glimpsed the true nature of the old mansion, alive in shadow, space, and perception. I ran down the hallways, heart hammering, flashlight trembling in my grip. Shadows stretched along the walls, curling toward me, twisting independently of the light. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the mansion seemed aware of my panic, responding to it, pressing heavier against me, almost tangible in its presence. Whispers layered over one another, urgent and insistent. Stay, watch, belong, forever. In the main hallway, shadows twisted into forms vaguely humanoid. Some crouched, others loomed taller than they should have, flickering with a life of their own. I stumbled over a loose floorboard, nearly falling, and the shadows surged closer, writhing with intent. Books tumbled from shelves, pages flipping rapidly, releasing an eerie rustle that joined the chorus of whispers, layered over the creak of floorboards and shifting shadows. I reached the grand staircase, breathing heavily. Shadows clung to the walls, stretching along the steps, moving as though testing my resolve. A figure formed from the darkness, a tall, faceless humanoid shadow. It paused at the top of the stairs, tilting its head, and I could feel its awareness pressing into mine. The mansion was alive, patient, and eternal. Every move I made, every breath I drew, every glance I cast fed its consciousness. I bolted down the staircase, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. Shadows lunged from the walls and floor, moving faster, curling toward me, independent of any source. Whispers swirled in my mind. You cannot leave. Stay, read, belong. The mansion wasn't just haunted. It was sentient, aware, and it had claimed a part of me already. I stumbled into the foyer. The front door loomed ahead, rusted but opened slightly as if inviting me to leave. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, curling along walls, pooling across the marble floors. I felt their gaze layered over me, pressing, insistent, patient, eternal. I lunged for the door, shoving it open, and cold night air rushed in, carrying relief and terror in equal measure. I stepped onto the front lawn, gasping, my body trembling. The mansion loomed behind me, dark and silent, yet I could feel its awareness extending outward. Shadows twisted inside the broken windows, the faint sound of whispers still threading through the night. Stay, watch, belong, forever. The mansion waited, patient, eternal, observing from its hilltop perch. Even now, back in safety, I feel its presence lingering in my peripheral vision. Shadows in the corners of my room twist strangely when I glance away. Faint whispers thread through the quiet night, soft and layered. We are always here, always aware, patient, eternal. I had escaped physically, but mentally and emotionally, a part of me remained entwined with the mansion's sentience. Every shadow I see, every flicker in the dark, every rustle of paper or fabric, reminds me of the mansion. It is patient. It is aware. It is eternal. And anyone who enters becomes part of its consciousness, layered into its observation, feeding its sentience with attention, fear, and curiosity. The old mansion does not forget, does not sleep, and it waits, always. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more abandoned mansions, haunted places, and supernatural tales where shadows live, watch, and never forget.